Last talk this morning before lunch, I'm happy to welcome back Doug Long, who received his master's degree in the Department of Paleontology here at Berkeley, and was one of our first PhDs from the Department of Integrative Biology. From there, he went on to do postdoctoral service at California Academy, where he is currently collections manager and a former chair of the Department of Ornithology and Mammalogy. But basically, when I think of Doug Long, I don't think of birds and mammals. I think of sharks that are trying to eat me. Those of us who are marine biologists always kind of love and kind of hate to come to talks on sharks because sometimes it gets a little too close to home. Today, Doug's talk is going to be California sharks, past and present.
Alrighty, I do work at the California Academy of Sciences in the Department of Ornithology and Mammalogy, and right now the majority of my research is on birds and mammals. I've got a graduate student and an undergraduate student working with me on turkey vultures. I've got some continuing projects on pinnipeds. The Academy has an ongoing project in China, and I've actually been doing some work on bats in China. We've got at least 5 new records for Yunnan province and at least 1 brand new species of bat. But part of my horrible secret is that I started off on the other end of the evolutionary ladder, working here at UC Berkeley, both on my master's and my doctorate, on various aspects of shark evolution. This will give you an idea of what a sick and twisted individual you're dealing with today. This is me at about age 5, and I was one of those kids that would pick up every dead animal off the beach, roadkill bones. I would take them home, preserve them, and this is where it gets sick. I had a card catalog with numbers on each one of these specimens and a little reference system so that I could keep the data with the specimens. So that foreshadowed a career in a museum situation. This is my first Platyrhinoides triceriata, and I still have that specimen today. While most kids in high school were doing after-school sports, I did after-school taxidermy. For 4 years, I worked in a taxidermy shop that was the largest strictly fish taxidermy shop on the West Coast. They would do hundreds of specimens a year, and I was quite excited not only to get minimum wage, but I also was able to look and study at the internal structure and external structure of almost every species of fish in the Eastern Pacific Ocean. This is a mounted, very large white shark. But for somebody who got very interested in fish and interested in anatomy and systematics, it was a real great pastime to be able to open these things up and figure it out, how they're built, how they're made. So this then brought me to the exciting academic world of ichthyology. As all of you have probably seen, it's a very sexy science. But for my dissertation work at UC Berkeley, I was very interested in looking at the evolutionary history of fauna. That is, the shark fauna in California. When you have a fauna, you're talking about a certain point in time, and all of the animals within that group, if you're studying birds or mammals, or in this case, a subgroup of fish, the sharks. And I was very interested in how the modern fauna arose. What were some of the constraints, and what is the evolutionary history? Because I didn't have a huge amount of grant money, I was tethered to the Northeastern Pacific within driving distance of the university here. But at the same time, this offered a wealth of specimens in 2 ways. California has a pretty rich shark fauna. It also has a very diverse fossil shark fauna as well. California has probably the most continuous fossil record of sharks of just about anywhere in the world. We have fossil sharks going from the late Jurassic all the way out through the Pleistocene. There's a couple little gaps in the Oligocene, but we make up for that. So I was able to both collect sharks and collect shark specimens from British Columbia all the way down to the southern end of Baja, and I'll explain a little bit more about that later. Now, the shark fauna in California isn't particularly numerous, but it is diverse in the number of genera and families. There's only about 44, 45 different species of sharks currently living off the coast of California, but that represents about 20 families, about 33 or so genera, and of the species, about 20% of those are endemic to California, meaning they're just found in California. The majority are populations that have been divided over time or fragmented over time, where we have temperate and cool temperate faunas that are separated by the tropics or by large ocean basins. And these separate populations are sort of unique to this area. And then we do have a number of shark species that are cosmopolitan today. That is, they range very widely. This is one of the endemic species. This is the leopard shark, very common in San Francisco Bay. Sharks are found, like leopard sharks here, in very shallow, brackish bays. Leopard sharks have actually been found even in freshwater streams, very near the mouths of rivers, but they can actually tolerate freshwater for short periods of time. And we have sharks going all the way down into the deepest submarine canyons in California. So they occupy a wide variety of different types of habitats as well. This is one of the deep water forms. This is a six-gill shark. This is actually one of the older species of sharks in terms of its evolutionary lineage. These go back to the Jurassic. Another ancient lineage is this one here. This is the California horn shark, so-called because it has spines in front of the dorsal fins. We're going to revisit some of these in a little bit later on in the talk. This is the California angel shark. It's a shark that actually looks like a ray because it is a bottom-living ambush predator. And so it has a type of background matching camouflage and will frequently lay buried under the sediment and will lunge out at unsuspecting prey. We get a couple other oddball things that are relatively uncommon. This is something called the ragged tooth shark, Odontaspis ferox. There's only been about 6 of them recorded from California and western Mexico. I actually have 2 of those specimens. California also has all 3 of the largest sharks in the world. Interestingly enough, these are all filter feeders. These are all sharks that, through either gill rakers or specialized teeth, can ingest schools of fish or krill or other very small planktonic organisms or just small fish and shrimp in general, can filter them out of the water. This is the whale shark, normally a tropical species. It's been found all the way up to Humboldt County. The basking shark, this species can range all the way up to Alaska. This was the basis of a very lucrative commercial fishery in the 1920s and then just after World War II, where they were hunted almost to extinction. And this one, the Megamouth Shark, not to be confused with the Megalodon, which you'll see later. Megamouth Shark, discovered off Hawaii in the 1970s, and then one of these was found in California in the early 1990s. We also have the smallest species of shark known. This is the Protomicroides bispinatus. That is an adult. And then we also have species that are found all over the world. This is a blue shark. Blue sharks have been tagged off California and have been found, or they've turned up in Hawaii and Nicaragua. Some of them have been tagged off Southern California and been found in the Gulf of Alaska. Very wide ranging. We also get some sharks that are a little bit more tropical in their affinities, that are found especially in the southern part of the state and at least come up to the central coast during El Niños. We have at least 3 species of hammerhead shark. This is the Scalloped Hammerhead. This is the bonnet head shark, more of a shovel-shaped head. And we get a couple species of these group called the Karkarodonids. This is the Carpus Shark, Karkarodon brachyurus. This is the dusky shark, Karkarodon obscurus, and we get the bull shark on occasion. This is one of the more dangerous sharks. This is probably responsible for the most human deaths worldwide. One of the reasons is because they frequently will enter streams. One of these was found in the Mississippi River in Illinois. One of these was found in Iquitos up the Amazon River, about 1,200 miles. They've been known to attack people in both the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. We infrequently get them in California, but we've seen them in Mexico, and I've actually seen these feeding on the bodies of dead gray whales in the birthing lagoons in Mexico. We don't know if they killed the babies, but we're probably feeding at least on stillborns. And then we also get the tiger shark. This is probably the second most deadly shark in the world based on the number of human fatalities. Uncommon, but there's at least one unconfirmed attack in San Diego by the species. A couple other groups, oddballs. We have at least 5 different species of cat shark. This one in particular is very interesting because it's called the swell shark because it swells up as a defensive mechanism. It was thought that maybe it ingests water and inflates itself like a pufferfish does to become too large for predators to eat. But further studies show that they normally will do this in cracks and crevices where they sleep. And they have very rough scales. And so when they inflate themselves, those rough scales will then push up against the irregularities in the rock, and it's very difficult to dislodge them, almost exactly like chuckawalla lizards do. That exact same anti-predator defense. One of the weirdest ones, which has been found a couple places off California, but the results of this species is seen much more frequently. This is a deepwater shark called the cookie cutter shark. It is a facultative ectoparasite, meaning that it feeds on bits of other organisms, not the whole thing usually. And it has an interesting lower dentition that forms a semicircle, and they have these large suction lips. So when they find something like a seal or a whale, or even other sharks, and in actually one case, the rubber sounding hull over a submarine, they will actually suck onto it and sink in that lower jaw and twist and take out a little cookie-sized plug of flesh. And this is what it looks like here. This is a young elephant seal on the Farallon Islands, and you can see that there are actually 3 nice little round plugs of blubber taken out of this animal. I've seen some beaked whales that we've had wash up on the shore that have had over 300 healed scars. And somebody reported on a whale in the Azores that had over 2,000 healed cookie cutter shark scars out of it. There are still species being added to the California fauna, this probably being the latest and absolutely the weirdest. This is one called the Goblin Shark, Mitsui. Only one has been found in California, and that was found just a couple years ago off San Clemente Island. San Clemente Island is this weird place that keeps producing oddball deepwater sharks. The other recent species was a longfin mako shark, which is a deepwater mako. But this is what the Mitsui or the Goblin Shark looks like.
Were these captured intentionally or just fishermen?
Just fishermen, yeah. And if you have a fisherman that is interested in this stuff, they'll sometimes give a museum a call. When you talk to fishermen, they'll say, "Oh yeah, we see those every once in a while, and we throw them back over," and then you kind of cry because this is not only the first California record; it's the first record for all of the Eastern Pacific Ocean, both hemispheres. Most species of sharks have these little electroreceptive organs called the ampullae of Lorenzini, and those organs detect the weak electrical field that all animals give off, prey animals. And so it's believed that this big spatula-like structure might be a way to increase the surface area for these ampullae and so that they can detect prey, especially a fish like this, which looks like it spends a lot of its time cruising over the ground, and it might be able to detect fish that are living on the bottom, or crustaceans or tube worms that are actually in the sediment below. Now, what about the fossil history of this fauna? Again, I was very interested in a fauna is a point in time in which you have these species that are interrelated with one another and that interact with the both biotic and abiotic environment. How does a fauna arise? Where does it come from? And what are those factors that help shape a fauna? And this is what most of my dissertation was on. Now, you probably have heard the idea that sharks are older than the dinosaurs. In fact, there's a little bit of a story going on. This is a bit of an outdated diagram of fish evolution. These are different groups of fish and the diversity through time. But you can see sharks here go through this weird hourglass evolution. And what we have going on are actually 2 different groups of sharks. Early on, we have a very primitive group of sharks that become diverse in the Paleozoic and then sort of taper out into the Mesozoic. And then we have the second group of sharks called the Neo-Salacians, neo meaning new. The second group that by the end of the Jurassic starts to diversify. And by the Cretaceous, we get most of the lineages of sharks that we have today evolving. And then it becomes even more diverse in the Cenozoic. So the sharks we have today are actually the second evolutionary sequence of sharks for the most part. There are a couple of these early groups that still linger on, but most of these are this second generation, if you will, of sharks. Now, when you study the fossil record, you think fossils. You think something like this, a beautiful, well-preserved, articulated specimen with all the parts there. It's going to be easy to identify it and look at the evolutionary change. But reality sets in when this is what you deal with most of the time. You're dealing with bits and pieces because when animals die, they fall apart, they're being scavenged, currents carry their bodies and little bits of them all over the place. So most of my work was actually done on these bits and pieces that had to be excavated in these various localities, fossil localities in California. So you have things like otoliths here, which are fish ear bones, stingray barbs, the dorsal fin spines of fish, the mouth plates of stingrays, vertebrae of sharks, vertebrae of fish, a pharyngeal plate from a type of croaker, the tooth of a sheephead, and if you're lucky and if you're a very good boy and Buddha's looking down on you, you get shark teeth. And shark teeth are very important in trying to understand the evolution of the shark fauna, because teeth are important for a number of reasons and can be very good aids in determining the evolutionary succession and lineage and speciation and paleoecology of these groups in a variety of ways. Okay. First thing is sharks produce teeth continuously. They have a system in which they have a single erect or functional row where these teeth are ready to work at any given time, and the teeth can be grasping teeth, they can be cutting teeth, they can be crushing teeth, and they have these reserve rows down here. So once one of these teeth is shed, there is another tooth in its place. And in most cases, you will have this functional row, and then you'll have this reserve row where there might be anywhere from 5 to 9 reserve teeth at any given time. And below this is a tissue layer that is producing new teeth. So teeth are being produced throughout the entire life of the shark. And it's been estimated in some studies on sharks in aquariums that they might produce well over 20,000 teeth in their lifetime. Some species possibly more. So that teeth are actually overrepresented in the fossil record. When you find a leg bone of a dinosaur is only going to have one left or one right leg bone. So that one leg bone represents one individual. You have 24 teeth of a shark, that might still represent one, maybe two individuals. So they are overrepresented in the fossil record, which makes them good. It makes them numerous. The other thing is that the teeth are very dense. They resist pre-depositional erosion. And also they tend to be flat or lenticular and very dense, and so they tend not to be carried by currents as much, so that when they're spat out of the mouth of a shark, they frequently will find their way down to the bottom of the ocean and pretty much stay there. They're not going to be carried or rolled around too much. And again, because they have a very dense enamel, they resist weathering. They also resist post-depositional problems, such as when the tooth is weathering out of a cliff. Because they're dense structures with this enameloid, they also resist any types of erosion after they've been deposited. Okay, so you've got overproduction, you've got teeth that tend to be very resistant to weathering, both pre and post deposition in the fossil record. The other thing, and the most important thing, is that each species of shark has a dental pattern that is unique to it. Shark teeth are species specific. So when you understand the range of variation within a species of shark, you can take a tooth and determine if it is that species, or if it is another species of shark, or if it is an ancestral form. So one of the things that I did for my dissertation is that I had to try to understand the range of variation within the dentitions of various species of sharks to determine if you have a tooth, is that tooth within the range of variation of one species, or is it between the range of variation of two different species. So this is the ragged-toothed shark, Odontaspis ferox. Look at this very unique morphology of the principal crown and the lateral cuspulates here. You could also see variation between the tooth at the middle portion of the jaw versus the teeth at the anterior portion of the jaw, and you see here the morphology of the teeth will change as you go along the tooth row. Okay, and so this is lower, this is upper. You also get some other ones, other interesting dental morphologies. This is the horn shark, and you see that they have these teeth here that are designed for grasping, and then these posterior teeth that are designed for crushing. Interestingly enough, they feed primarily on crabs, young lobster, sometimes urchins, so it is basically a crushing dentition. Some species like this, the Sixgill Shark, very interesting. Look at these teeth that look like combs. These are lower teeth. Upper teeth look completely different. And the teeth in the back of the jaw look very different than the teeth in the side and the front of the jaw. If you look at this one, this has got to be the weirdest shark in California, and I didn't have any good pictures of it. This is the only one that's ever been found, and again, this is also, well, this is found off Point Arguello, the only one for the entire eastern Pacific. This is one called a Frilled Shark. It looks almost like an eel, and they've got very interesting teeth here with these tri-cuspidate crowns here. Again, very distinctive. The teeth on the lateral sides have these little cusplets in between the primary cusps. You get these. This is the file-tail cat shark. It's beautiful. They look like little snowflakes. Look at that. I mean, they're incredible. Look at these. And then you get species that are closely related. Still, you can tell apart. This is the gray Smoothhound, found here in San Francisco Bay. This is the brown Smoothhound, also found in San Francisco Bay. Very, very closely related, but still you can tell differences. That with the brown, you have this little cusp up here, and you have these rugosities here at the base of the crown's foot. You don't get that in the gray Smoothhound. So that the teeth are species specific. That with these teeth, you can identify the species, or you can identify an ancestral form, or identify a species that may not be found in California today. The other thing you need to do, again, is understand the range of morphological variation. There are differences between upper and lower teeth, as you can see here in the white shark, and we're going to explain this at the end. You see there are differences between the front and back. In some sharks, there's also differences between males and females, and there are differences between adults and juveniles in some cases. So you really have to take a good look at a lot of teeth. And I looked at well over 2,000 sets of shark jaws from the different species. Where do you get these shark jaws? One good place is a museum. I hit just about every single museum and university teaching collection on the West Coast to then take measurements, take photographs, try to understand the range of variation in the modern record, to then go back and look at the fossil record. Also in the museum archives, you'll find all sorts of unpublished gems of records, species of sharks that have never been reported in the literature. This is a beautiful picture about 1964 of a Comprar Shark. This is the first record, at least at this time, for this species of shark. The other way you get shark jaws is by going out and getting your own. And you can go out and fish if you want to, but that's a waste of time. The best thing to do is follow the fishermen. So I spent a lot of time at fish markets and at commercial fishing docks in California, and even more time in Mexico. This is San Felipe. I would usually go to San Felipe about 4 to 5 times a year and work with the fishermen there. In Mexico, it's very difficult to get collecting permits. So what you do is you trade 6 packs of Tecate to these fishermen here. And yeah, they're willing to go out and catch whatever you want, especially if all you're interested in is getting the measurements and sexing it and then taking the jaws, and they can sell the meat at the market, no problem. I would also spend a lot of time at the Fishermen's Cooperative in Ensenada, probably go down 6 to 8 times a year to the Fishing Cooperative in Ensenada. And at the same time, you know, you got to taste the local flavor, including the only manta ray tacos I've ever had. But trying to understand the origin of a fauna isn't just looking at the fossil record. It's also trying to understand what climatic changes or oceanographic changes have occurred over time and how that may shape the animals that live in that environment. More importantly, with sharks, you really have to understand what are the factors that help to shape the range of a species of shark. Some species have very wide ranges, some species have very, very limited ranges. And what are those factors? How does the ocean limit or promote the range of a certain species of sharks? So one of the things that I did was look at the known distributions of sharks in the northeastern Pacific Ocean. And one of the things I did was plot the sea surface temperature going from the equator all the way on up to 70 degrees north. And as you can see, and this is something you already know, it gets warm here, Club Med down here, you get up toward the Gulf of Alaska, it gets very cool. Okay, makes sense. And what's interesting is that if we go back, in the north, this is where we have the lowest diversity of sharks. There's only 3 species. But what's really interesting is that you get some species like this. This is the Pacific sleeper shark, Somniosus. This is very, very big shark. They can get well over 20 feet long. Lives in very, very deep water. Has an extremely slow metabolism. There's some evidence that shows that these individuals might live to be well over 200 years old. And it lives in deep water that's very cold. In the north, they tend to be found nearer the surface. Well, that's because they live in a temperature range. In the tropics, that temperature range is very deep. In the far northern part of the northern hemisphere, that temperature range is very near the surface. So these are sharks that are pre-adapted already to living in very cold environments. The other end of the scale, you get something like this, the salmon shark. This shark is a high-speed, high-energy, high-heat shark. Has the ability to produce its own internal body heat and conserve that and circulate that body heat around its internal system and try to stay warmer than the ambient water temperature. And if it stays warmer, it can be much more active. And we'll get back to this in just a little bit. But if you look at shark diversity, going from the equator up to 70 degrees north, we see that there tends to be a large amount of diversity in Southern California, northern Mexico. If we look at the range of endpoints of species, we see that the ranges, the northern or southern ranges, tend to fall out in certain areas. And what we get, if we look at the overlap of species ranges as one, or if we look at endpoints of species, we tend to see that it breaks up in a very interesting pattern. What we see, if you look at the same type of criteria for invertebrates and for bony fishes, there are different marine provinces that we find where species distributions will end at certain points or begin at certain points, or where you get overlaps of certain species concentrated in some areas. So with invertebrates, there is the Arctic province, there's an Alaskan province, an Oregonian province, a Monterreyan province, a California province, little Mexican province that goes up into the Sea of Cortez, and then a Panamic province that goes all the way down, basically to the equator. If we look at the distribution of sharks, we tend to see that it falls out fairly well, that we have this Arctic province, this Alaskan province, we have an Oregonian province that's actually extended and includes the Monterreyan province, we have a California province, a little bit of a Mexican province with primarily subtropical sharks, and then a Panamic province with these largely tropical forms. And here, if you look at the provinces, the diversity of the provinces, you see that the Arctic province, fewer species, Alaskan province, more Oregonian, more Californian, very diverse, and then the Mexican and the Panamic. Well, now, we can say with certainty that the shark distributions, here let me go back to this, shark distributions are regulated by ocean temperature, because where we see these divisions, we tend to see changes in current patterns. We see the Davidson current basically goes up along here, brings warm water up in the fall. We get certain currents in California that help to circulate warm water down here. The Central Pacific current, I think, splits right about here and goes into two different directions, so that these end ranges are fairly well controlled by where we have changes in temperature regime that are coincident with changes in ocean currents. Okay, so that these shark distributions are related to changes in ocean climate, basically. Well, here's the fossil record. You look at the fossil record. One of the good things about California is that it was underwater, at least for the last, at least since the end of the Jurassic period, actually before that. And so one of the good things about California is that there is a lot of marine deposits. Okay, this is the Miocene here. And you see that there are marine deposits going from, this is a real interesting one that I've worked in here. This was an extension of the Sea of Cortez, actually, that came up to here. Parts of Riverside County, you can find remains of sharks from the Sea of Cortez, but all throughout Baja, actually the Baja Peninsula, most of that was covered during the Miocene. Huge amounts of deposits all throughout southern Central California. And places like the southern end of the San Joaquin Basin was a very large embayment, very large shallow seaway in here. And I don't think Bakersfield ever looked better than when it was underwater. Alrighty. So what I did was, for my dissertation, I looked at fossil sharks from the late Cretaceous all the way on onto the Pleistocene. I looked at teeth from about 160 different deposits. Okay, that's a lot of deposits, either in museums or actually going out and digging my own and risking the wrath of landowners and different types of soil-borne bacteria, like valley fever. And this is basically what I came up with. To make a long story short, this is what we see. These are all the species of sharks. And this is when I turned this into the, I think, Registrar back around 1994. Well, I've since found a few more species that push their range back a little bit. But these are all the known species from the northeastern Pacific Ocean. And this is the Holocene right here. And there are some species where we don't have a good fossil record. And in almost all cases, they are deep water forms because we don't have very good deep water marine deposits throughout at least most of the Neogene. But we do have a good record from the late Cretaceous all the way on up. But we don't get any of the extant taxa at least until the Eocene. So we get at least one species in the Eocene. In fact, I'll talk about that. Yeah, here in the Cretaceous, we had a cosmopolitan fauna. If you look at the fossil sharks, they tend to be species that are found pretty much throughout the world. Many of the taxa from the Cretaceous of California have been found in France, they've been found in Australia, they're found in northern Africa, they're found in South America. So the Cretaceous, very, very cosmopolitan, and you can see why, that there were these large seaways, large, expansive seaways. The continents weren't really blocking much in the way of ocean circulation. This would be us right around in here. So we share taxa from here and taxa from all throughout here, taxa from even some Cretaceous deposits there. Very widespread. Something happens in the Eocene, though. We see in the Cretaceous you find cosmopolitan distributions of most species, or at least most of the genera, closely related groups. In the Eocene we see something else happening. We see a change in ocean climate. Cretaceous is very warm. We start to see a bit of a cooling period in the Eocene, and we also see an interesting reshuffling of shark species in different ocean basins. What happened in the Eocene was very interesting. This was the Eocene right here, where you had South America connected with Antarctica. And so what happens is you have ocean currents that are being deflected around, moving up, circulating around. When the Drake Passage opens up, because of that pesky tectonic action, you get the Drake Passage opening up, and what happens is you have currents now just spinning around Antarctica. So cold water that was being shuffled back up and warm water that was coming down is now completely changed. And so you get Antarctica turning into an icebox. And so you get this circumantarctic current that develops. What's interesting is because this is cold water here, that cold water sinks. It causes a phenomenon known as Antarctic bottom water, where this cold, dense water sinks and it slides along the bottoms of ocean basins and travels very, very far as well. So now you're starting to get a cooling of the ocean, and you're getting change in the current patterns. And so at least in the northeastern Pacific, you're starting to see some taxa which were widespread and cosmopolitan, like this one here, Eugomphotous, known now as Carcarius, becoming extinct. And you're seeing some new taxa starting to evolve. Well, in the Miocene, we get a little bit of a change. The Miocene tends to warm things up just a little bit, but we see something very interesting, is that there is now a subdivision of the Pacific between the north and the south. That if you look at Miocene deposits in places like Peru, and I was just in Peru at some of these Miocene deposits in January, you see marine mammals that are completely different in the southern hemisphere than in the northern hemisphere. You get many species of fish down there that are completely different. So now you're getting a very interesting situation where there's now differences between the North Pacific and the South Pacific. Also, you're starting to see a connection between faunas on the Northeastern Pacific, Japan and California, very similar taxa in marine mammals and sharks and fish. Also similarities between, say, Peru with their penguins and Australia and New Zealand with penguins and some similar marine mammals. But things really changed at the end of the Miocene. In the Hempylian stage, which is the land mammal stage that is often applied to marine vertebrates, marine invertebrates have their own system, and Jerry Lips can tell you all about that. We see something really amazing happening. We get this phenomena called upwelling, and that's when everything changes. Upwelling is, to save you a little bit of time and explanation, upwelling is a situation now where, because of the rotation of the Earth and certain wind patterns and drag, you get a situation where water from deep down in the ocean comes up near the coast, and that cool water drags with it nutrients that have fallen down to the bottom of the ocean. So it acts as a fertilizer for the phytoplankton that is at the surface. And that phytoplankton is the base of the food chain. So where you have upwelling, you tend to have very, very rich, very diverse marine faunas. And that's what we have here off the coast of California. We have upwelling. That's one of the reasons why our marine fauna is so diverse and unique in terms of fish and invertebrates, marine mammals, and even sharks. So what happens is that in this period of upwelling, right here at the Hempylian, you notice how there's a big change. Many species start here, right here. That's because we are turning on this brand new marine ecosystem. And we have many species of sharks that suddenly evolve here, very quickly evolve. At the same time, if I overlaid ancestral forms, we have many species that die off here. Many species of sharks that are adapted for warmer water, warmer, tropical, less productive waters die off here. And these sharks that have evolved with this whole system of upwelling. We see this evolution with that whole oceanographic system here. And now, not just the oceanographic system, but the ecosystem that evolves in concert with it. Pretty fun stuff. Okay, so that's basically it in a nutshell. By the time I was finishing up my dissertation, I got stuck with a little side project. And that's one of the pitfalls of being a graduate student, is that you're grabbing at all these little things that are fun and exciting and new, and you've got to turn in a dissertation. But gosh, you could start studying a white shark. So I did a lot of work on the white shark. The reason why is because I was interested in the evolution of the white shark. If you look in the fossil record, you get this big species here. This is Karkarodon Megalodon. It's probably not even Karkarodon now. Karkarodon is the genus for the modern white shark. It was believed that this is the ancestor of the modern white shark. And what we see are these teeth that are very large. If you put out your hand with your fingers outstretched, this tooth would be bigger than the palm of your hand with your fingers outstretched. This is a gigantic tooth from an animal that, at least based on the fossil record, is known to eat whales, because we find the serration marks on the bones of fossil whales. Were they preying on the whales? Were they feeding on whales that were already dead? That's very difficult to determine. This is the modern white shark. This is the Megalodon here. You can see relative size. This is an early reconstruction of what the shark looked like based on a little bit of bad statistics. This is a more modern reproduction of what the jaws of the shark would have looked like, eating most of the Smithsonian Department of Ichthyology crew. But it was a big shark, probably about 45 feet long. Definitely had teeth for eating meat. And so I was interested in looking at the white shark, because at this Hempylian stage, you get that Megalodon dying out, kaput. You get the modern white shark showing up at the same time. There's a little bit of overlap. At the end of the Hempylian, a little bit of overlap. And there's a great site down in Oceanside that's just one slope of this hill in this really, really bad neighborhood in Oceanside that I was able to work at for a couple years, where you get this overlap of this gigantic species dying out and then this new species showing up. What I was interested in is looking at the evolution of the white shark. How is the evolution of that shark related to these changes in ocean temperature and related to the changes in the ecosystem? Well, if you look at the teeth of the white shark, these are white shark here, this is the bull shark, I forgot to put the tiger shark down in here. Tiger shark teeth have a very low aspect. They are very wide teeth with a very low crown. They're designed for crushing. One of the things that tiger sharks eat are sea turtles. They tend to be a generalist, but when sea turtles are around, they will eat sea turtles quite frequently. And that's based on stomach content analysis. Bull sharks are predatory, but also scavengers, so their teeth are designed more for cutting. White shark teeth you see here have a very high aspect. Look how tall those crowns are. How does that allow them to be predators in the way that they are? The other interesting thing that showed up is that there are a couple fossil deposits where you see within the sequence, just a little sequence of a few feet that probably represent just a few 100,000 years, the development of serrations from unserrated teeth. Very interesting. It was believed that the white shark evolved from the Megalodon. Now it turns out they actually evolved from something that's a little more like a big giant mako. So you get no serrations, some crenulations here, weak serrations, coarser serrations, and finally a nice serrated tooth. Now, serrations, we know from studying things like dinosaurs and steak knives, are used for cutting meat. Right? What does that mean? If we look at the evolution of cetaceans and the evolution of pinnipeds, we see that white sharks start where you get peaks in both the evolution of pinnipeds, so seals and sea lions, and the evolution of cetaceans. And then so white sharks evolve right at this time, right here, the modern white shark. So I was very interested in trying to understand how white sharks use their teeth for feeding and how they feed and what they feed on, to try to understand if, in fact, the evolution of the white shark is interrelated with the evolution of pinnipeds and cetaceans. Is it a coincidence, or is the evolution of that shark directly related to marine mammals as a food resource? So while I was, scratching around trying to finish this dissertation on all these little shark teeth I found in the dust, this was a lot more fun. Did some work out on the Farallones. I also did work with the Marine Mammal Stranding Network. The Marine Mammal Stranding Network is a federal program, because all marine mammals since 1972 are protected, even when they're dead, that we work, both Bob Jones at the MVZ and I at UC Berkeley, UC Berkeley, that was 1994, at the California Academy of Sciences. We were contracted with the National Marine Fisheries Service as the people that respond to these dead animals. We have to collect basic information about these dead seals and sea lions and otters, identify what they are, the age, the sex, measurements, basic cause of death. You do a little necropsy on the beach. We don't get paid for it, but what we do get is even more valuable than money. We can publish on all of that information that we collect. We have to turn copies of individual stranding reports to the government so they can track changes in mortality over time. They can look to see if a certain species is increasing in mortality, or if just pups are dying off at a certain time of year. Or if there's an oil spill, they know what the natural mortality rate of animals are. So this information is being used by the government to track life history rates of different types of marine mammals. I was very interested because marine mammals wash up dead for reasons, and a lot of times they wash up dead because they are the victims of predatory attempts. Either animals that are alive or dead. Oh, if you think this is bad, I've got a couple more that, I'm not going to censor nature. I'm going to show you exactly what happens. This is a California sea lion that's live, and we see here very large bite in the pectoral region. This is a young elephant seal, also alive, and we can see that there was one bite here with a second bite attempt on the carcass of the animal. This is an animal that was bounced around in the mouth of a white shark and managed to get out here. And this is a really good one, and it's not good because it's in beautiful, gory Technicolor, but it shows two things. Now, if you can remember from that series of white shark teeth that I showed that were taken out of the jaw, the lower teeth are long and narrow. The upper teeth are a little bit more wider and triangular. And that's because the teeth function in two ways. The lower teeth, when a shark bites the animal, oftentimes the lower jaw will swing up, impaling the animal just as the upper jaw comes down. So the lower teeth are long and narrow to impale the animal, to hold on to it. Then the upper teeth come down and chomp through that animal, bite through it. So the difference in the teeth has to do with the different types of mechanical function. And this is the most exciting thing. This would always excite me when I'd find something like this. A chunk of a marine mammal that had actually been bitten in half or bitten through. Because when people talk or describe the teeth of serrated animals like sharks or T-Rex, they talk about the serrations acting like a saw. Well, it doesn't act like a saw at all. One of the things I would do is very carefully examine the bones and examine the tissue to see just how it was cut. And what's pretty interesting is that these teeth are designed in two ways. The points of the teeth are designed to focus the impact force. Okay, so the teeth here, as a shark bites down, and it can bite, it's incredible what they can bite through, but that bite force is being projected on these different points. And these teeth are long to basically act as these slashing organs. And what happens is that as the tissue is being forced in between these teeth, it's being pinched and being cut almost like a pair of scissors. Secondarily, the serrations here act as a miniature version of that. As tendons and muscle fiber is being pinched in between those two sharp edges, it again also acts like a little bit of a scissor. So that the lower teeth are for impaling, the upper teeth are for cutting and gouging. And what's really interesting is that when you look at bone, the teeth, the serrations, don't saw through bone. They smash through bone. The force is, when they bite down, that force is on these points. And so you can see it's like having like 6 or 7 ice picks all come down at once, where the force is magnified on that point, that crown apex. When the shark shakes its head from side to side, that force is now focused on this edge here. And so when you look at animals like sea otters, I looked at numerous sea otters that had been chewed apart by sharks but not eaten, you find the bones have just been smashed. They've actually just been obliterated. So the teeth aren't for sawing, the teeth are for slashing, and the teeth are for crushing and smashing. I worked on a variety of other projects to look at the natural history of white sharks. We were able to determine that the primary feeding area is here in Central California. Southern California, they probably go down to breed, because one of the things I was able to do at these markets in Baja is find juvenile white sharks, or newborns. They're born at about 1 meter long. White sharks are pretty big babies. And they spend most of their time down here in Southern California, feeding on other fish until they get big enough to tackle marine mammals. And that's something that's really interesting. If you look at the stomach contents of sharks between about 7 and 9 feet long, they start feeding on young sea lions, young harbor seals. As they get bigger, they can tackle bigger things. with the Marine Mammal Stranding Network and the work we did with the Farallons and with the Marine Mammal Marine Mammal Center in Marin, we're actually able to look at about 550 carcasses that had been attacked by sharks that somehow the animal managed to get away. And so we looked at the distribution of the recovery of these carcasses, and this is where you do not want to go surfing, right around here. We looked at the seasonality of these carcasses, and we see that along the mainland, we get a peak in white shark activity in late summer and early fall. We think that the adults then migrate to southern California and southern Mexico to breed. We also see that after they're done feeding around the coast, they swing out to the Farallon Islands, and we see that predation basically peaks around November, and you can see in both cases it slopes. We get fewer individuals. If we look at years, we tend to see peaks and valleys in the number of shark-bitten carcasses that we've found. That has a lot to do with the El Nino. Again, one of the factors that helps to determine where marine organisms are found are ocean currents. And when you have an El Nino, you get warm water coming up. Now, these young white sharks have a very low surface-to-volume ratio. They need to stay in warm water. And also, more importantly, the food. Young sea lions, which are born down in the Channel Islands, get pushed up. So we get more white sharks in the Central Coast and more pinnipeds in the Central Coast. So during El Ninos, we had a big one here in the 80s, big peak. We also had a pretty good El Nino back in the late 90s, which is when I did this study. So we get distribution relating to ocean temperature. We also look at the pinnipeds. Primarily, subadults and young animals are attacked, probably because it's a basic type of natural selection. When an individual learns to identify a predator or dangerous areas, a greater chance of survival. So adults have learned through watching their siblings getting eaten. The other thing that I was very interested in is looking at where the bites were found on the body of an animal, because pinnipeds have two basic means of locomotion. Sea lions and fur seals use their front flippers as paddles to swim. Elephant seals and harbor seals use their hind flippers to swim, sort of like a fish almost, side to side. So there's the idea that if you have an animal that has survived an attack, even if it dies later on the beach, it should show that a shark has failed in getting one of those vital areas. The belief was that a shark would go after a sea lion by biting its pectoral area, because that would immobilize it, or it would attack an elephant seal by biting the hind limbs and thereby immobilizing it. So what we saw did fit in some cases where sea lions that survived attacks tend to have those attacks in the rear portion, leaving their front flippers mobile. But we also saw elephant seals, there's no clear distribution, and harbor seals, even the reverse. What we're able to determine is that white sharks will try to inflict a massive, fatal first bite, basically anywhere in the body. You can bite the hind end, the front end, wherever it is, you will hit blood vessels, you'll hit major organs, you'll cause that animal to die. What was really interesting, though, is that when we were looking at predation events at the Farallon Islands, actually watching sharks going and killing seals and sea lions, we saw that for successful attacks, something like 3/4 were instant decapitations, where the shark just snapped the head right off the animal. And it's absolutely amazing to see a 600-pound elephant seal just floating in the water. Next thing you know, it's just this blimp with no head. But you can see here, this is a young, probably about a 2-year-old northern elephant seal with a bite where it managed to pull its head out of the mouth of the shark just in time. Talk about lucky. Now, when I was a kid, I always heard about the fact that dolphins attack sharks, and dolphins will protect you if you ever, get in a shipwreck. Not entirely true, because we never found a single white shark washed up on the beach that had wounds inflicted by a dolphin. We found many, 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 many dolphins that were attacked and killed or partially eaten by white sharks. This is my favorite. This is a Ziphius, Cuvier's beaked whale. We actually saw the carcass when it first washed in. It had been attacked and killed by a white shark, or attacked and mortally wounded by a white shark, came into the shallows, died, and then as the carcass washed back out, there was a shark waiting for it. And then this is what we found the next day. This is just the remains of the head. This animal was about 11 or 12 feet long, and what we were able to see based on the tooth marks and the jaw widths on these carcasses is that the bigger a white shark gets, the bigger food it can tackle. And so we see this is about the maximum size range, whales that are about 11 to 12 feet long, and adult predatory sharks being in this probably 18, 19 foot range. right? This is reversed, but one of the things we did was look at how a white shark is able to attack a dolphin, because they have sonar, right? And they can detect movement around them. We see that the wounds take place in bodies where the sonar doesn't really travel. So a shark can attack from the top, it can attack from the bottom, get the abdominal area, the genital area where there's a big network of blood vessels, or the tailstock, which would immobilize that animal. In fact, most of the attacks we would see in this tailstock region. So we know that with dolphins, white sharks are doing a surprise attack, trying to immobilize the animal by biting its tail or getting a big, major bite in one of the abdominal areas. And so this is a basic attack scenario that we'd see. The other thing is that white sharks feed primarily on pinnipeds when they're adults. If seals and sea lions aren't around, they might eat some fish, but they primarily eat seals and sea lions. When those aren't available, they will eat also carcasses of whales. They will scavenge on whale carcasses. And so these are, this is the seasonality of shark-wounded pinnipeds. This is the seasonality of large cetaceans that we've found that have had white shark bites on them. So white sharks will feed selectively on marine mammals. So white sharks are marine mammal predators, probably evolved that lifestyle. And we see that in the fossil record, we see that in the morphology, and we see that in the modern behavior today. We also did statistics, and that proves everything, so everybody was right. What did I throw out? What's next? Oh yeah, why are white sharks feeding on marine mammals? Well, something that's really interesting about white sharks, mako sharks, and salmon sharks, this one group called the lamnids, is that they are quote-unquote warm-blooded sharks. They're not true endotherms like mammals are, but what they do is, because they are very active, their swimming muscles give off heat. As muscles contract, they give off frictional heat. And what white sharks are able to do is they have this interesting circulatory system where they have a network of capillaries in those swimming muscles that can capture that frictional heat that is produced while swimming and then circulate it around the body, thereby warming the animal from the inside. Okay, so it's a cycle that feeds into itself. The shark has to be very active to stay warm. When it is warm, it can be more active in cold water. Most other sharks are functional ectotherms, where their ambient body temperature is pretty much that of the ambient water temperature. White sharks can maintain a very high elevated body temperature well above the ambient water temperature. And so as ectotherms go, the warmer you are, the more active you can be.
How much above?
A friend of mine did work on the Farallones on that, and he recorded one that had body temperature that was 20 degrees above the ambient water temperature. So the shark needs to be active. The problem is to be active, to maintain that high rate of activity and to maintain that high body temperature through swimming. The shark needs to have high energy food, and that high energy food is found in the form of marine mammals, especially blubber. White sharks will selectively feed, it seems, on marine mammals that have large amounts of blubber, elephant seals especially. Frequently they will attack sea otters, but they almost never eat sea otters. Sea otters have almost no blubber for insulation. But when they're feeding on whale carcasses, one of the things we've noticed is that they will selectively strip the blubber layer off. They will not eat frequently the muscle layer underneath. They will strip that blubber layer off. And that fat can be easily converted into food energy. And what's really amazing is that on the Farallones we saw, in fact on one day, we saw a female eat 3 elephant seals. Each one of those elephant seals was ranged between about 300 and 600 pounds. We estimated that she had about 1.5 tons of meat in her belly by the end of the day. That is a lot of fat to be able to move on. All right. So where do we stand? So that was a little diversion, and then, did all that, published a bunch of papers, and then you had to go where the money is, and I got a job at the Academy, first doing ichthyological work, writing what was heralded as the most important text on ichthyology since Linnaeus, which is also the most tediously boring book on ichthyology since Linnaeus. It's basically a description of all 53,000 known species of fish. It reads like a phone book, not very interesting, but got a postdoc out of it, did some work on the Galapagos on deep sea fish. We think we got a new species of shark in the Galapagos. We got a whole bunch of other sharks. Landed a job at the Department of Ornithology and Mammalogy, because as a kid I used to raise birds and I did a lot of work with marine mammals as well. And so here I am. But where are the sharks? Well, California sharks are actually imperiled now. Sharks are very low, or have a very low reproductive capacity. They tend to produce very few young. They tend to mature very late in life. Some species of sharks not giving birth until they're 20 years old or more. Frequently, a female will not breed every year. There's evidence now that she may breed every other year or every third year. And in relation to bony fish, which may produce hundreds of thousands or even millions of eggs, they produce a couple or a few dozen individuals at any given time. So the species, all shark species in California are being targeted as food. And many species have shown very serious declines. Some species are, quote unquote, economically extinct in California because they no longer can support the fishery that once targeted them, like the basking shark fishery or the soup fin shark fishery. Also, there's a problem with not just targeting certain species of shark as food and overfishing them. There's also a problem with sharks as bycatch, where there are gill nets that are set for other commercial species of fish, swordfish in particular, or sea bass, and sharks oftentimes become entangled in these nets and die. Fortunately, in California, there was a bill that was passed a few years ago that put the white shark on the protected species list that is showing that there is a change in attitude, where at one time grizzly bears and wolves were hunted because they were potentially a threat to humans. Now people see that they are majestic animals that are very important parts of an ecosystem. And when the white shark bill came up for a vote, we thought that there was going to be a lot of, or very little support in some regards. But interestingly enough, we had support from the Surf Rider Foundation. Surfers frequently get bitten. A sport fishing club supported us. And the Commercial Fishermen's Association of California supported us. We got all these groups that we thought may be opposed to the bill supporting the bill. What was interesting is that I talked to the head of the California Commercial Fishermen's Association. He said anything that will reduce the number of sea lions is good for us. But in any case, the only dissent we had was actually from SeaWorld of San Diego, because they wanted to catch white sharks for captivity, but they eventually relented, and white sharks are now on the protected list. Unfortunately, there's not enough protection for the remaining species of sharks, and so there is still a decline for some species in California. But fortunately, attitudes are changing. This was just after the Jaws movie came out. The Universal Studios had a tour. They took this out. This has been taken out and removed because people see just how ridiculous it is, not because of the bad anatomy with these carrot-like teeth, but also with the fact that we know from living in California that there might be attack on humans every once in a while. We have one of the lowest fatality rates for shark attack in the world, and that sharks are important parts of our marine realm. So, thank you very much.